Why do characters in Zack Snyder movies do anything? I mean, like, aside from because it's in the script, what purpose do they seek? What outcome? How? For many watching this video, you probably came to it through my Twitter account, where you likely have seen me sporadically rant about the failures of Zack Snyder as a storyteller. It is no surprise that I am not a fan. Yet while I can ignore the works of many people I am not a fan of, for some reason I can't help but return constantly, against my own will it seems, to Snyder's work. It's like trying to unravel a murder. There's a body, there's a crime scene, we are Batman, trying to figure out what happened and why this maniac would want to destroy these things we love. Yeah, okay, that's overdramatic, but Zack is an overdramatic kind of guy. His intent, as stated, was to show heroic characters in different lights, to consider the deconstruction of them. Never mind the fact he's 30 years too late to that, and what he sees as fresh and cool takes are month-old leftovers. And he legit doesn't understand how boring that perspective of his is. But that's not the real problem behind why his vision fails. His failure is in scope and repercussions of the reality around his written characters. Take, for instance, Lex Luthor. Lex blew up Congress. Did you forget that, like me, Zack, and the rest of the audience? Because Lex blew up Congress, and it didn't matter jack squat to the narrative. Sure, Luthor ends up in prison at the end, but you kind of get the feeling it's for killing Superman with Doomsday, not for committing one of the largest acts of domestic terrorism in American history. Nor is it ever mentioned again. Waller doesn't start the Suicide Squad in case other evil billionaires try to attack the US state like Lex did, which would be a far better use of such a team of misfits and low-end metas. She does it in case Superman goes bad, and yes, Snyder had a heavy hand in Suicide Squad as a producer. The only perspective that matters in these films is that of the Superman, the superior being, and the conflict from us mortals getting in his way. To Snyder, Lex's crime wasn't blowing up Congress, it was attacking the living God, daring to stand against the Übermensch, the objectively better being according to that Nietzschean philosophy. If, as the film philosophizes, Superman is God, and Lex hates God, then Lex's villainy, his moral failure according to Zack, is trying to limit this superior being. And where have we heard that dribble from before?
Miss Rand, you have said that your primary purpose in writing is to project the ideal man. For those who may not have read Atlas Shrugged and have not yet met Hank Rearden or John Galt, how would you describe the ideal man?
Well, it actually took me about 700,000 words in Atlas Shrugged to describe him, so it's impossible to give a description. But I could tell you only the essential characteristics. Above everything else, a rational man.
A rational man.
Rational man. A man guided exclusively by reason, an independent man, and a man of great self-esteem. I would name these three as distinguishing characteristics, the essential ones of what I regard as an ideal man.
So a rational man, then, would depend upon nothing except his own reason for determining his actions.
Exactly.
Ugh. It's no secret that Zack Snyder is equally a fan of the ideas of late author and raging hypocrite Ayn Rand, as he is dismissive of actual comic books themselves. Since the still semi-mysterious flustercuck surrounding Justice League, and the regrettable suicide of one of his children, Zack has been hard at work adapting Rand's The Fountainhead for the big screen, with his aptly titled production company, Cruel and Unusual Films. For those who have never had the displeasure of slogging through that Randian prose, The Fountainhead is about an architect who is better than you and has designed a hospital for sick children. When the Hospital Foundation asks for a few aesthetic changes to modernize the structure to then current taste, the titular Fountainhead throws a fit and burns the hospital to the ground, which the book celebrates as a defense of individuality and self-determination, and not, vengeful arson dooming several small children to suffer and die, rather than get help at what would have been the most advanced medical facility in the country. It is one of Snyder's all-time favorite books, and it shows in his work, like the conclusion of Man of Steel, when two better-than-us mortals are allowed to wreck Metropolis, flattening entire boroughs and killing who knows how many people. But the moral crutch of the film hinges on the decision of one of the better-than-us mortals deciding to save one family. In Snyder's world, Superman isn't responsible for the deaths of anyone leading up to that moment. They are just collateral damage in service of being Superman. Even the single mere mortal hero, Batman, is skewed Randian, as he takes it upon himself, and his own moral judgments and determination, to stop Superman, and fails. But his failure is never explored beyond a vague "I should have helped him" notion, not a failure of his base philosophy. As such, the tragedy at the end of Batman v Superman isn't that Superman sacrificed himself to stop Doomsday, it's that we mere mortals would dare attack him. Society does not matter to Zack Snyder, only the superior beings matter. Let's take it from another perspective. I considered delving into 300 for this, as it focuses on the better-than-us mortals 300 Spartans and their king fighting the multicultural and feminine Persian Empire, but 300 was a near-perfect adaptation of the source material, and all that stuff is from Frank Miller anyway, who will get his own episode in the future, I promise you that. Instead, we're going to see what happens when Zack applies objectivism to my favorite writer. The graphic novel Watchmen, by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, is a metatextually layered story about the moral failures of people who would identify themselves as superheroes, people who deem themselves above society and the law, and how they interact with that society, along with, from the perspective of the reader, who is expected to be a normal person living in said society, moral failings of the only legitimate superior being in the world, Dr. Manhattan, and the eventual conflicts with Adrian Veidt, whose entire persona in and out of the tights is that he is the best human on Earth, and we are all pawns and scum. In the book, Adrian is the villain, murdering thousands in a terrorist attack on New York, because he thinks he has the authority, self-appointed, to steer society to a better world, even if it means it's on the back of an engineered tragedy in the form of a seeming attack from outside society. Adrian's plan, to unite Earth against an until then unknown other, comes directly from a quote by Ronald Reagan.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?
As such, Veidt engineers for the actual superior being to be off-world and unable to respond when he sets off his attack. The only thing the superior being does from that point forward in the plot is kill Rorschach for daring to reveal Adrian's deception to the world. The fan-favorite character is murdered by two self-appointed heroes because they decide it is better for the world in the short run to lie, murder, and cover up than it is to address the problems of society head-on. The bad guys in the end are the objectivist superior beings, one aloof and disinterested, the other dangerously arrogant. Zack Snyder's Watchmen, however, turns the superior being Dr. Manhattan into the main character and mechanism. See, it's not just about changing the ending and not including the giant squid monster. I mean, it is, but it's about what it represents when it comes to how society processes and understands events and tragedy. In Snyder's interpretation, the superior being of Dr. Manhattan is all that matters, not society. That's why he shifts the end to Veidt using Manhattan's power signature to cause multiple detonations across major cities worldwide, believing that Veidt's villainy was uniting the mere mortals against the superior being, and killing far, far more people in the process. But Zack's focus on the godlike Superman means he misses why this doesn't work, because Zack doesn't understand how society functions. For decades in story, Dr. Manhattan has been the face of American foreign policy. Forget carrier groups, F-15s, Hueys over jungles, or ICBMs. America's prosperity and security was bought by Dr. Manhattan's overwhelming power as a means of deterrent against Soviet attacks. When he removes himself from the geopolitical events in the comic, his void leads to increased hostilities between the Cold War powers, an increase he is powerless to stop. If he returned, all he would be doing was reasserting the status quo that led to the escalation in the first place. He represents stagnation, which is why Veidt takes such a radical step to change the global security status quo by introducing an outside threat. In the film, Snyder has Veidt make it seem like Dr. Manhattan has chosen another route, or lost his mind, and attacked various cities across the globe, uniting humanity behind Veidt to fight Dr. Manhattan.
Under attack. Millions of lives were suddenly ended in an act of evil perpetrated by Dr. Manhattan himself. Since the attacks, I have been in constant contact with the Premier of the USSR. Putting aside our past differences, we have both pledged to unite against this common enemy. With the rest of the world, we will prevail. This is a day we shall never forget. And yet we go forward to defend the human race and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. God bless us all.
Do you see? Two superpowers retreating from war.
This is relying on Randian philosophy about the gullibility of the masses and their desire to depose their betters. In the book, Veidt is merely looking to distract Manhattan away from interfering in his plan, but in the film, manipulating society against Dr. Manhattan is the end goal. But that's not how society works, and I don't think Zack Snyder quite gets that. If the face of American foreign policy one day destroyed a bunch of international capitals, and New York, the world wouldn't join forces with America to fight it. They'd blame America for allowing this walking nuclear option to exist and operate in the first place. It would be like if a chief of staff went off the rails and launched a nuclear war. Ultimately, America would be held responsible, as it was their soldiers acting with their arsenal. The giant squid in the book works because it is an other. It is new and unknown. Its attack is unpredicted, and using tactics unfamiliar to humanity. And in the aftermath, Dr. Manhattan is forgotten about entirely, having failed to stop it. One leads to a false world peace, Veidt's intention all along, while the other would lead to a global war of literally everyone against America, ensuring, paradoxically, a world under Soviet rule, who Ayn Rand hated most of all. And to this day, Zack doesn't understand why it doesn't work, and that failure, I think, will be the longest lasting legacy of his career. In 10 years, very few people will bother remembering his version of Watchmen. HBO will see to that. And already, his cinematic contributions to the mega juggernaut that is comic book movies exist only as cadavers to be studied and learned from. They are dead, and they aren't coming back. And I suspect that The Fountainhead will likewise be dead on arrival, expected to land around the same time that Trump's first term is set to end. And I hope American audiences will be less interested in celebrating an arrogant property developer crapping on defenseless kids while telling everyone how great he is. Zack Snyder. Just the worst.